Security concerns have been raised about the imminent release of the radical preacher Anjem Choudary. He was convicted in 2016 of inviting support for the so-called Islamic State. He's now eligible for early release, but the BBC understands that police have prepared up to 20 control measures for his probation period. Our Home Affairs correspondent Catherine Carpenter has more details.
The London bombings on 7/7, the murder of Fusilier Lee Rigby in Woolwich, and the terror attack at London Bridge last year. Just 3 of the deadly assaults on the capital carried out by violent jihadists with links to the Al-Muhajirun network. Now banned, it was led at one time by Anjem Choudary, a radical preacher from Ilford. For years, Anjem Choudary himself managed to avoid falling foul of the law. But in 2016, he was jailed here at the Old Bailey for encouraging support for the so-called Islamic State group. The judge described him as dangerous and calculating. But now, having served half of his 5.5-year sentence, he's due for release this week.
He was a very easy to get on with guy at university, and he's a person who knows how to deploy that charm in order to persuade people to follow a particular path.
David Toube studied law with Anjem Choudary. He now works for a counter-extremism organisation. How much of a danger do you think he will be on his release?
It really depends on how closely he was supervised and how successful the security services and the police are at keeping him away from his existing followers and potential new recruits.
Mr. Choudary is coming out of prison on licence. That means his movements will be greatly restricted. The BBC understands he'll spend the first 6 months in a probation hostel, and today his assets were frozen.
I think the conditions that we're seeing him put under are, potentially the most stringent we might have seen in this country for some time for someone who's not sort of being held in detention in a prison. This is not a problem that will go on for a month or 2 months or a year. This is essentially conditions he's going to have to maintain under for the foreseeable future.
And the financial burden creates risk elsewhere, according to one of the Met's former counter-terrorism commanders.
When you place resources on convicted terrorist offences, when you have surveillance teams following them around, etc., you're taking away the resources from sometimes more hardened individuals who are plotting attacks. So it's a diversion of resources that you need to deal with the current threat at the current time.
The government wants to introduce longer prison sentences for people like Anjem Choudary, but with his release imminent and others to follow, monitoring old threats and new remains a balancing act. Catherine Carpenter, BBC London News.